Seth, and this is the Legend for Life podcast. Thanks for listening, and today's episode is going to be kind of an intro to loneliness. I think loneliness is really huge right now, and I don't know if I can talk about everything that I want to talk about in just one episode. And of course, I want to hear from other people about it if they'll talk to me about it. But so this is just kind of what I've noticed about loneliness. When I think of loneliness, it brings me back to middle school, high school, that kind of thing. And why I say that is, in middle school and high school, all that stuff, we're surrounded by our friends. The people that you get to go to class with your friends. You after school, you're hanging out with your friends. Like, basically, your job, which is high school, you're still in the classroom with all your best friends. And here's the thing: for those of us who aren't in high school or college, we're not hanging out with our best friends all day long. And so that makes having those meaningful relationships a lot more challenging. I remember when I was in high school, after school, me and my buddies, we would, go play frisbee golf. And it was just so much fun, whether you had a bad day of frisbee golf or a good one. You were still with your friends, laughing, talking about your day, which is huge, or just that camaraderie. I mean, and unfortunately, when we're adults and working jobs, we don't get that as much. And for me, when I was done with college, I moved to Madison, Wisconsin, in order to kind of be around some of these guys that I was very close to when I was in high school. And even then, it was still a challenge. Getting together, we did it, semi-often, but, in what I would do with most of my time is I would play video games. And, like the highlight of my week was when I would kind of go down to what's called State Street, pretty cool place, on Friday. And there was this bar where a guy would play piano and take requests. And honestly, it was awesome. It was really fun. But at the end of the day, I was still feeling lonely. I was still, by my lonesome. Even though I had that neat experience of, oh man, going to see the piano guy and playing video games, which is fun, I still was missing meaningful relationships that actually, combat the feelings of loneliness. And so, why do we feel lonely so much today? I'll give you a hint. I do not think it's because of social media. I think that's kind of silly. But I wonder if we're isolating ourselves. I think relationships take time, and cutting out time in order to make an open space for a person or people can be challenging. Watching TV or sports or video games, it's a lot easier. It's really, really easy. And there's an added benefit is we can talk to people about them. But here's the thing, when we do those things, like when we're able to talk to people about, oh, did you see that amazing catch that Adam Thielen made? He's awesome, by the way. Did you see that awesome catch that Adam Thielen made? They probably have, because it was awesome. but we're not making those meaningful connections. I can talk with some other guy about, oh, this video game is really fun. You've got to try it. And even play with me even. But here's the thing. We're not able to make those really deep connections. The thing is that we can do these things, and we can talk with people, but they're really surface level. They don't challenge us. When I looked at different articles as I was trying to get a good idea about loneliness and how we're experiencing it, I encountered some really neat articles, and one of them talked about how guys really need face-to-face interactions. I'm not 100% on board, but I think it does make sense. And another thing that the article talked about was that there are some attempts to build these really deep connections with, an intense week out in the wilderness. We're gonna challenge you. You're gonna overcome obstacles. You're gonna do it together, and you are gonna leave changed guys. And I think that's great, really. But the thing is, you leave. You stop being with that person. You stop being around them. And you're back to square one. You're sitting at home alone. The article, one of the articles that I read, suggested that it's part of the reason why Joe Rogan is so popular. He's a really interesting guy, and he has conversations that we can interact with, but to ourselves. We get to think to ourselves about the things that Joe Rogan is talking about. And just, by the way, just a side note, a lot of different podcasts can do that for people. Even the radio. I love listening to the radio on my way home from work. And, it's the same thing. You hear these voices, you think, oh, that's kind of neat. And I think about them, but it's different than obviously talking to a person. And I had an experience much like the guys on their hardcore trip. I went on an amazing trip to Yosemite National Park with my family. It was the guys on my Thompson side of the family, so that was pretty cool. And these hikes that we went on at Yosemite were very, very difficult. And I was able to build pretty close connections with my family members on the trip. We are still close, but when you go through these hikes and stuff together, and you make meals together, you really get pretty close. Overcome obstacles after obstacle. And one of my brothers was with me on the trip, and he was my roommate at the time. And here's the thing. He had a much harder time with the hikes. I do think he can be pretty athletic, but it was more of a challenge for him to do the hikes than it was for me. And I'll say it was still challenging for me. But here's the thing. I remember how proud I was of him when we got back, when we made it on that hike, the Half Dome hike. It's I'll let you know, it's 16 miles and 4,800 feet of elevation. It's not an easy hike. It's very challenging, and there are some really slippery parts, And, ugh. But I mean, it's beautiful. It's worth every step. Uh, but that's not to say that it's easy. It's the opposite of easy. um, but when we got back, and we were at the apartment, we would talk about how difficult that hike was, and we were just so it was awesome to be there with my brother and say, yeah, like we did it and you did it, and it was so awesome to see you as you had that challenge and you never gave up. You didn't turn around. You kept going until it was done. That was awesome. It was awesome. But here's the thing. I moved away from my brother. I no longer live in the apartment with him. We still have that moment, but we aren't able to spend that time together. And I think that that's kind of our issue when it comes to loneliness. We have these great experiences with people, but we don't have a community that we are super part of, or a really close friend like that. It makes me think, why is that? And I've got a few ideas. And so here's the first part to that. And it's gonna maybe hurt some feelings. Sorry, pet lovers, and I love pets too, but I think, just hear me out. Why do we love pets so much? Well, they're companions. I'm talking about dogs mostly, but there's a catch. And as great as they are, I mean, dogs are awesome, and can't say enough great things about how awesome dogs are, and just petting them and hugging them and taking them for walks and stuff. It's great, but the problem is we can't confide in a pet. We can't talk about a rough day with a pet. They don't challenge us to grow as much as a person does. Unlike a pet, when I was living with my brother, he would point out when I was doing things that were kind of gross, like being angry. So for instance, like we were playing a video game together, and I was getting angry when we weren't doing very well. And like, how are we supposed to be having fun? Like, this is what we're doing for fun, and I'm getting angry. A pet can't point that out to me, but my brother, a real person, can. The other thing about pets is that people, unlike pets, can let us down. Getting close to people means that they now have the power to really hurt us, and that's scary. For a lot of people, I think it's this calculation that they make when they decide to kind of, I'm going to go in the shell, I'm going to avoid relationships, I'm going to feel lonely, but that's what I want to do right now. Building relationships, it's a lot of work, and that's the thing, it sets us up to be hurt. I can be alone but safe over here by myself. And I did this myself. I was working at a company for I think about 3 years or so. And, I had plenty of time to let people know that I was leaving. And I did. Part of me wanted to, organize something with all my friends so we could all get together before I left. And I really, really wanted to do it, but there was an issue. I was worried that people wouldn't want to come. And that worry of being hurt and let down kept me from organizing it. It was the fear of the pain that kept me isolated and hindered me from having what probably would have been a really fun, farewell get together. And I don't want to be living with fear as my go-to and to keep me from doing things. That I think is how we get to the point of loneliness. We're scared. We don't want to be let down. So we go on our shell. Can't hurt me if I don't know you. And so what can we do about loneliness? I think there's a very important first step. Now, I'm no expert. I'm just some Christian dude from Wisconsin with a microphone, but I've got some ideas. I think that the first step is to understand that you aren't alone in your loneliness. And so let's talk about the loneliness that Jesus experienced. I would say he was born alone. And what do I mean by that? His experiences were his own, being that he was fully God and fully man. There's literally nobody on earth, past and before and after, that could understand the things that he was going through. He was all by his lonesome. And just imagine what that would have been like growing up for Jesus. Picture all the people that really, really wouldn't like him because, Jesus reminds them of how sinful they are. Adults and children probably really wouldn't like him. Think about, I'm sure there were very unique struggles that Jesus faced even as a child. Oh, but wait. Then Jesus starts his ministry, and he has his disciples with him, and he was with them for a good 3 years. But when he's being tempted in Gethsemane, his best friends can't be bothered to stay awake. Then Jesus gets arrested, and when he's crucified, those same dudes that couldn't be bothered to stay awake don't even show up because they're scared. He spent years with those guys, not just some crazy week of bonding and adventure and overcoming adversity, but years. And they deserted him. They left him high and dry. Then, when he's on the cross and he's paying for your sins and my sins, he's on the cross, he's paying for our sins. As he's doing that, he cries out, God has forsaken him. Even God. He is alone. He's more alone than you and I could ever even imagine. I don't even want to be able to understand that. So I think a good starting point is to think about and to try to grasp the loneliness that Jesus endured because of his love for you and me. And so with that in mind, what can we do to escape our own loneliness? I think what we need to do is we need to open up to a person or a group of people and really let them see us for us and understand that means our faults as well as our strengths. Because, we don't want to just, show people how terrible we are. But it does involve that. And instead of listening to Joe Rogan talk about something, let's try opening up to someone maybe about what we heard on Joe Rogan, or maybe about something that we're thinking about. It could be tons of different stuff. And also, it can look a zillion different ways. What I'm going to do is probably going to be different than what you're going to do. But, I really want you and I to challenge ourselves to open up to somebody or get involved in a group and really get to the point where, they can hurt us. But the hope is that they won't, and that, boom, we're having a good time and we're coming back from it and we're saying, gee, this is great. I feel this sense of community. I'm not so lonely anymore. We're going to go in knowing that they might hurt us, or this person or this group of friends in one way or another. But we know that it's the friendship value makes it worth it, because they're going to challenge us and we're going to grow, and that's a lot better than feeling lonely. And if you want to contact me, you can either do that on the Facebook page that I've got, or my email. That's going to be in the show notes. Or I have an Instagram page now because I'm hip and cool. So thanks for listening to the Legend for Life podcast, and I'll talk to you next time.